February 19th, 2025 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have two meetings this evening, a Police Committee meeting and a Board of Commissioners meeting. But before we start, please silence your cell phones. There's amplifying equipment available for those who are having difficulty hearing. The room is also equipped with telecoil technology. And later, when the floor is open for public comment, the board will first take public comment from those of you who are here in the room, then we'll turn to people who are attending virtually. We ask that you use this podium to your left, and please introduce yourself before making any comments. But first, we have the Police Committee meeting, and I recognize its chair, Vice President Kramer.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have two items on tonight's agenda. The first is an authorization of disciplinary action for a police officer, and I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a 3-day suspension for a violation of the alcohol policy for a police officer as recommended by the Superintendent of Police. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin. And I will call on Superintendent Block for a little more information.
Yes, this was as a result of the violation of our drug and alcohol policy where an officer had tested positive for consuming alcoholic beverages. We filed within line with the policy. He followed the policy, and as a result of that, we're before the board this evening because part of that policy is a mandatory 3-day suspension for the infraction. Thank
you, Superintendent. With that, I'll open to the floor for, or I will open to the public for anybody who has any comment. You can come over here. No? Okay. Anybody on Zoom?
No one has their hand raised.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board? All right. With that, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Our second item is also an authorization of disciplinary action for a police officer. I'll make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a 3-day suspension for a violation of the sick leave policy for a police officer as recommended by the Superintendent of Police. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin. Superintendent Block?
Yes, thank you. So this disciplinary action comes with an investigation that we conducted where an officer was absent without official leave where he used sick time. As a result of the investigation, we found that it was not the appropriate use of the sick time. So in addition to the recommendation of the suspension, we would also recommend that the restitution be repaid to the township for the sick time that was used inappropriately.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to public comment. Anyone in the room like to make a comment? Okay. Anybody on Zoom?
No one has their hand
raised.
All right.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right. With that, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously, and that concludes the business of the Police Committee. Thank you, Superintendent Block.
Thank you very much.
There you go, President Sinai.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Kramer. So will the February 19th, 2025 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion please come to order and all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney was here, but I was not.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Ms. Epstein.
Here.
Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes.
Here.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Here.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Dr. Rossman.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Present.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Woodring.
Here.
Mr. Zelloff.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes of the stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held on January 22nd, 2025 as distributed. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. A few announcements. The board met in executive session earlier this evening regarding the following matters: some police personnel matters, sewer easement litigation, and a business tax settlement. We now turn to the public privilege of the floor. This is a section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any non-agenda items or any other public matters in which the township has jurisdiction or authority. If you're interested in commenting on anything that is not on tonight's agenda, we're going to ask that you come up to this podium here State your name, where in the township you live. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Hi, my name is Jeff Loebman, and this is my wife Rachel. We live in Ballackinwood. We're here to speak with you today about local encroachment on free speech by government officials and the Lower Merion Code of Ethics. While our son was home for winter break after his first semester in college, we put up a sign that states Jewish students deserve to be safe on campus. We selected this specific sign because it's pink, and it conveyed our support for breast cancer awareness as well. We put our sign at the entrance to our driveway so it was visible to us coming home as well as to others. Our next door neighbors put a wheelbarrow and a bag of dirt in front of our sign from their property in such a way the message could not be seen from that side of the road. We then attached the message to a tall 2x4 so it can continue to be visible. On January 21st, our next door neighbor, Anna Shurak, a member of the Lower Merion School District Board of Directors, sent us an email. She wrote that our sign was frightening the children in the neighborhood, acknowledged that she blocked it intentionally, and she asked us to remove it. Because of our sign, people told us about what was happening in the local school district. Our youngest child is a junior in private school, so we typically don't hear much. One of the things we were told was that Anna was running for re-election. I wrote to Gilda Kramer's personal email address, explained what happened to her, and asked, do you plan to endorse a candidate to the board of directors that finds this message, Jewish students deserve to be safe on campus, objectionable enough to block it and ask that it be removed? Gilda asked to have a call with us, and during that discussion, she asked us to make modifications to our sign. I approached Gilda in her role as the nominating committee, and she very clearly answered me in her official capacity. Our conversation was invasive and disturbing. We did not take down the taller version of the sign, and Anna blocked that as well. Anna then put her own sign up, a We Believe sign. The net effect of Anna's actions were to diminish our free speech and convey that her message is worthwhile and ours is not, a similar theme to something that she advocated publicly in her elected role. In fact, it was a physical manifestation of the ideology that these causes are important, but this one concerning Jewish students and our son is not important. A few weeks ago, there was a community meeting about Jewish children not feeling safe at Lower Merion schools, and it highlighted disturbing incidents of verbal and physical assaults. We made the connection to our sign, and we realized how wrong it was for Anna to censor a current local issue in a political campaign. The actions that occurred are not compliant with multiple sections of your code of ethics. The conflicts of interest should not be tolerated by this governing body. Our elected officials have a duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and we ask that you take corrective action to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your service to our community.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to take advantage of public privilege?
My name is Ellen Sklar. I live in Lower Merion, and I've been very happily a member of this community for more than 50 years. In the winter, I swim at Lower Merion High School, and in the summer, I swim at Belmont. And I am here to tell you that both places are very crowded, and I would appreciate putting on your agenda for things to do for the community is to consider more aquatic opportunities, facilities. And in particular, it would be wonderful to have a facility that was open all year round. I feel a little uncomfortable following such a serious matter, but I think this also needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Lipman. I'm a retired physician. I am here on behalf of the JCC at Kaiserman and City Line Haverford Avenue. I too am a swimmer for the past 45 years. 10 years ago, we
Sir,
had a
would you mind speaking a little louder? You're a little hard to hear. Sorry.
10 years ago, we had a near tragic event at the JCC. The roof of the aquatic complex collapsed in an ice storm, not unlike this winter that we're having. And the building had to be torn down because it wouldn't meet code, and it was converted into a summer swimming complex only. And so I would second what Ellen just said. I too swim at the high school. I'm very pleased to be part of the community at the high school. It's a wonderful facility, but it is only open from 5:30 in the morning to 8 a.m. Similarly, I've been at Belmont Hills and the YMCA, now that it moved from Ardmore to Havertown, is a little bit too distant for us. But I would just encourage the township perhaps partnering with the JCC and recreating an aquatic complex that is open on a more regular basis. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Hi, good evening. My name's Alan Kravitz. I live in Balkinwood, Belmont Hills, and I'm also an avid swimmer. And I'd just like to bring the attention that to have a facility that would be open all year round, possibly indoors as well as outdoors. There are some facilities, like they mentioned, the high school, which has limitations with their hours. The Belmont Hill Pool in the summer, which is a beautiful facility for relaxation. There's a little lap pool to do some laps. The timing just doesn't seem to work. To have something that's available a little more for swimmers. I'm not sure if you're aware, in this area there's a lot of real serious swimmers. There's a lot of people in the area that are training for major competitions, being triathlons, Ironmen. Swimming is all part of their training routine. To have something that could be possibly open all year long would probably be, I think, a benefit to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to take advantage of public privilege? Okay, Jody, anyone online?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, thanks. Do any of my fellow commissioners wish to respond to public privilege? Commissioner Gilder-Kramer.
Jeff and Rachel Loveman, I appreciate your coming down here to speak, and I just want to make it clear that when I called you in order to try to help resolve a dispute among neighbors over the placement of a sign right on the border of the property that was disturbing and upsetting the children of your neighbor. I am pleased that, over time that you and your neighbor were able to resolve this issue, and I noticed that you've moved your sign to a different location, and I really appreciate your being considerate of your next door neighbor. As far as I'd also like to respond to the residents who have come to speak about the need for a pool that is an indoor pool that's open year-round. This is an issue that many, many residents have raised with me over the last few years, and that we are starting to explore through the Parks and Recreation Committee that I chair. I appreciate your speaking about the need for an indoor pool that has more regular hours than the extremely limited hours of the high school. And I've made inquiries to see whether those hours can be expanded, and unfortunately, I've been told that they can't be expanded. So, if we want to have something available to meet the needs of the many swimmers in our community year-round, then we are going to have to explore other alternatives, and I hope that this board will do so. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Commissioner Zoloff.
Thank you. To the Logans, Thank you for coming. Thank you for expressing what you did, and I hope you have done so at a public meeting of the school board as well. I encourage you to do so. I encourage the swimmers to speak with Donna Heller, our Parks Director, about the hours in which lap swimming is available at the Belmont Hills Pool. I encourage you to go to the Bryn Mawr College website. They open their pool to the public. I don't know the hours. I know people who swim there. I think there are other school pools where public swimming may also be available, and perhaps our Parks Director can find out more about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoll. Any other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We are going to thank you for everyone who spoke this evening, and we appreciate the comments. We're going to now turn to public comment, which is the section of the meeting where members of the public can address the board on any agenda items, including the ordinance that are going to be considered for adoption later in the meeting. So these same rules apply as previously stated for public privilege. So if you want to comment on any of the things that are on the agenda for tonight's board meeting, please come to this podium. All right, anyone online, Judy?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. With that, we're going to move to the consent calendar. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove anything from consent? Okay. Then I need to move that we approve the consent calendar as presented, and including the items from the earlier police committee meeting. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. For the adoption of the consent calendar, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Ms. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes, but I abstain as to subpart I.
Thank you. Dr. Rossman.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Woodring.
Aye.
Mr. Zillow.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The consent calendar is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We're now going to turn to the Building and Planning Committee. We're on page 21 of your packet, and that is the 230 Church Road preliminary subdivision. And to start us off is going to be our Director of Building and Planning, Chris Letzoid.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is an application for a two-lot subdivision on Church Road over by Lower Merion High School. It was previously brought forward in November, and it was tabled till December to work out some issues between the developer and some neighbors. Resolution to the neighbors' issues were brought forward at the December meeting, and then the board requested some additional supplemental information on zoning and subdivision code that was provided between the December meeting and this meeting. The applicant is here. They were represented by counsel. Earlier this evening, they submitted a letter to the board that's been distributed. I'm happy to answer any questions. And the action tonight is to approve a two-lot subdivision, and there's also a waiver from the subdivision code that is part of that approval for the lot-to-width ratio. And I'm happy to explain anything more if you'd like.
Maybe just to kick it off, I can have you remind people, because it's been a bit of time, what is that the waiver is for?
So when we do land development, there are two primary codes. There are several codes that a land development needs to follow, but the two big ones are the zoning code and the subdivision and land development code. They're separate codes. The zoning code includes what the use can be in a zoning district, and it has the bulk area standards, how wide a lot needs to be, the minimum width of a lot, the minimum area of a lot, how the maximum height that a building can be. This application complies with those zoning standards. But at the same time, the building also needs to meet the requirements of the subdivision and land development code. That code has certain more qualitative elements to it. In the subdivision code, there is a requirement that new lots cannot be more than 2.5 times the length than they are wide to make them regularly platted lots. This application, by dividing the existing lot into 2 lots, violates that. The proportion is approximately 3.5 to 1 as opposed to the 2.5 to 1 that is permitted under the code. In December, this was discussed, and I raised the point that I felt that since this is what's being proposed is a twin home, not a single-family home, that the code, that I think it was something that we had missed when we adopted the saldo, because from my perception was that twin homes normally have longer lots. They are not single-family homes. If you think of a twin lot, it is really two single-family homes that would comply, that would be cut in half, so they'd be longer, narrower lots. And what staff provided to the Board of Commissioners a couple weeks ago was some information where we looked at at all of the twins in the township, and we looked at what the average lot depth was, and it somewhere was around 3.3 to 1, and it exceeded what would be in the zoning code today. But what the applicant is seeking tonight is a waiver from that subdivision aspect. We do currently in the subdivision code, it does not differentiate between single-family lots and twins. That's something that we probably should go back and look at. If the board wants to continue having twins in the township, we should look at making sure that the subdivision code and the zoning code are in harmony. There's a bit of a conflict now, but that's what the waiver is about.
Okay. And then just to be clear, and I'll give the applicant the moment to say something if he wants to. Is the lot not developable, or it's not developable as a twin? It can be developed but not subdivided, right?
Correct. It is currently a single-family home. It can remain as a single-family home. It could be torn down and rebuilt as a single-family home. It could be added onto as a single-family home. It could be rehabbed as a single-family home. It could also be converted into a duplex without a subdivision. So in a duplex, the difference from a twin is two homes side by side. A duplex is two homes, one over the other.
Okay.
So it's still developable. It's just not developable without the relief as a twin.
Okay, so before I open up for questions and comments, I know the applicant is here to answer any questions, but if they would like to take a moment to, make a statement, there you are, Matt. I'll give you 3 minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
That's more than.
Yeah, you can.
You can pull it out if you want.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think, as Chris indicated, first, the project here is fully compliant.
Introduce yourself, although I believe.
Oh, sure. My apologies, Mr. Byrne.
No, that's quite right.
Matt McHugh, attorney for the applicant, Rayer Home Builders. The project here that's before you this evening is a fully compliant project with the exception of the single waiver we're requesting from the lot depth requirements. The use twin homes are permitted in the MDR district. The project meets all zoning requirements and all other SALDO requirements. Chris had indicated, hinted to a conflict with the SALDO and the zoning ordinance. And there is a significant conflict here in that you actually can't develop a 35-foot wide twin use or subdivided lot without some form of relief, whether it would be a variance from the lot area requirements or a waiver from the lot depth requirements. And what I mean by that is your zoning ordinance says you can have a twin lot that's 35 foot wide. Your SALDO says it could only be 2.5 times that depth. That gives you a maximum lot area of 3,062 square feet, where your zoning ordinance then says you have to have a minimum lot area of 4,000 square feet. So there's this conflict where you either need to get a variance or a waiver. Here's where we're constrained and different from any other project. We're an existing lot. Our lot depth on this lot is approximately 162 or 163 feet. We can't go to the zoning hearing board and take this project and get a variance from lot area. We meet it. The only way to take this project and have it approved as a permitted use as a twin home is to get the waiver from the lot depth requirements. If you were to say, we're not going to grant this waiver, go ahead and move forward with the project, it would completely transform this. It would require us to put a lot line at the 2.5 foot or 2.5 times mark, which would be about 93 feet deep. It would create a third lot behind the two twin lots, and all three of those lots would need some form of variance relief from minimum lot size, from not having frontage on a public street, and then also the building envelope would be significantly shrunk so that setback variances would be required. So you would be looking at, instead of one single waiver, which is what's being proposed here, you'd be taking a project, adding another lot, requiring variance relief, 3 to 6 variances at a minimum, and still probably requiring another waiver from the saldo. So my memo set forth the standard for which the Board of Commissioners can grant a saldo waiver. It talks about the literal enforcement of the saldo provision being either unreasonable or causing an undue hardship. And I think that's exactly what we have here. We have a single waiver, which is if it's denied, to take the same exact project, you would have to then make it a 3-lot subdivision, get somewhere between 3 to 6 variances, and still get a different waiver from the Board of Commissioners. So I think that right there is a textbook case. And staff has looked at this waiver in the past. My understanding of the information that was provided was that there was approximately 54 waivers requested in the last 20 years from this provision. It's been granted each and every single time. So I think that the facts and circumstances here, dictate that the waiver is appropriate, it should be granted, and that the township's historical application would be consistent here if it is granted. So happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I'm going to open up to my fellow commissioners for questions. We'll do the comments later. Yeah.
Actually,
Commissioner Grimes.
Mr. McHugh, may I ask you a question if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely.
So you've talked about the hardship because you need variances if you're going to do a twin and a third lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a house on this property right now.
Correct.
Couldn't that use continue without any variances or saldo waivers?
Sure, it could, but that's not what the standard.
Well, no, I'm just
Yes,
asking a
yes,
question.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a single-family home.
So couldn't this house be, if the owner of the property wanted to build a new house, couldn't this house be taken down and a new single-family home be put in its place?
It certainly could.
Right, so, forgive me, but I'm a lawyer. So where is the hardship? The hardship, I'm asking this as a question. Because the hardship, it seems to me, is that your client wants to build a twin.
Yep.
The hardship is not that there's a physical problem with the property that can't be overcome, or that the house can't be lived in, or that there aren't uses for the property, which is my understanding, that's what a hardship is.
And you're talking about hardship in the context of a zoning application. And in my memo, I cited a case law that says, hey, when we're talking about saldo waivers, it's a different standard than the hardship that you're talking about for variance.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But the hardship, there still has to be, and the code talks about an undue hardship. So what I'm saying to you, and is that it seems to me that the hardship is that your client can't develop the property the way they would prefer, not that the property can't be used because it's being used successfully today and it could be used tomorrow for the same use or some other use that doesn't require the salvo waiver.
Right, I would just modify that statement and say it's not the way my client prefers, it's the way that the zoning ordinance has been adopted to allow him to develop and use property in this district, which then the saldo says you can do it this way, but that has this gotcha where you can do a 35-foot wide, lot width, but then you can't meet the minimum lot area requirements because you can only be 2.5 times that depth. Right. So that conflict it's not a use variance standard of, I don't have to show that we can't use it for any purpose. We have a lawful purpose that the zoning ordinance allows, and the waiver is the reasonable accommodation or modification to allow for permitted development.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for you.
Thank you.
Should I make a statement now, or should I?
No, let's get some questions.
Oh, fine, I'll save my statement, but thank you, Mr. McHugh.
I think they'll naturally come together. So, I have a few questions that I'll jump in now with, and Chris, they're for you. I think to start. So I'm a little confused about this conflict. Is it literally that one cannot ever subdivide a current single-family property into twins in these MDR areas, or just simply this one, given how narrow it is and how long it is, it can't be done? Like if this were a wider lot with the same depth.
Right.
Okay.
If it was a different lot configuration, you could create a twin. Correct.
Okay.
If it was a less deep lot, it would be easier to comply with this saldo provision.
Okay. And
This
so
is an existing long lot.
Okay. I think the rest of my questions are actually comments. Anyone else have questions for staff or the applicant? If they come up later, I'll let you do them. Okay, so anyone wish to make comments about this? I'll go first, or Commissioner Grimes, do you want to go?
Well, I've probably sort of
I'll go
projected
first.
some
I'll
of the
go
things I
first.
wanted to say.
I'll go first.
Why don't you go ahead, and if I want to say
Okay.
something different, I'll follow you.
So Chris, I appreciate you were kind enough to make a map for me. I appreciate you putting this up. And like some of those, my comments might end up being sort of like questions you can respond if you want. Like I am concerned about a bit about process here, in the following way, which is we have a saldo that really sort of controls where we can subdivide things, a parcel. We have a zoning code that says, on a lot, like what are you allowed to build, right? Like how much can you cover, right? And so I don't see the conflict the same way the applicant does. I see that we have two different mechanisms for controlling what happens, right? And you were kind enough to make this map, which shows all the places where, I guess those things would be in conflict, right? That one would say you could do one thing and the other one says you can't, right? And I always viewed our zoning code and our saldo together as basically being like belt and suspenders, right? Like what we would apply both of them and that would sort of tell us what we could do. And so when an applicant comes to us and says, well, what I want is like the most generous of the two things, right? I'm like, I have trouble with that. But I recognize that there are these conflicts, right? And so I guess the question is like, why shouldn't what we do just be, we should go and revisit this in the zoning code, like you suggested in the saldo, and like look at where this should be fixed and fix it in the appropriate locations, right. and just do it legislatively, because like clearly the legislative intent when we did it before was it's either a mistake or it was legislative intent. It's either a feature or a bug, right? So like the applicant thinks it's a bug, I think it's a feature. Right. The reason that I think it's a feature is that I went and looked on Google Maps of some of these dots, and like in some of these dots, like I really don't think we want to give a waiver to let them be turned into twins. Right. I looked at some of the ones in the lower right there, and they're on streets of kind of like compact houses that if you like put a twin on them, it would completely disrupt the fabric of that streetscape. Right. And I worry that if we were like, okay, we think policy-wise this was a mistake in the code that we should correct here, that then we are kind of thinking that we're going to correct it everywhere, or we're just going to sort of on an ad hoc basis sort of like evaluate each one. Does it seem right? Does it not seem right? That seems like a really risky slope to go down, right? Like I would much rather have us go through and have you guys like analyze these and say, you know what, like here are the conditions in which it makes sense. Like this might actually be a location where it makes sense to do it, in these other locations might not. Let's refine our zoning code as opposed to like, on these one-off ways, you take a look at it. So I guess that was a comment. So I'm certainly not in favor of this. I do think this is an issue that deserves more study, but I'm with what Commissioner Grimes implied, which is like, this is a completely developable lot. And like, if you can develop it now with a single family home, like I don't feel an obligation to let people put 2 4,000 square foot twins on it. And I think the only reason we're addressing it is someone's like, hey, I would like to do this, right? As opposed to we as a board saying legislatively we should try and fix this. I would rather take the board action. Anyway, any other comments? Commissioner Whalen.
Yeah, I think I actually started this back in December and caused this whole hornet's nest, so I figure I'd at least owe it to the board to step up again. I think that from a procedural standpoint, setting aside any thoughts on the, good project, bad project, we always, talk about how we don't want to get into that discussion, how it's not an appropriate discussion for us sitting on this board. Procedurally, first and foremost, we made a legislative decision not too long ago. And that legislative decision was to pass a new saldo, to pass a new zoning code. We cannot now by project coming in front of us, re-legislate that code. If we do believe that there is something inherently incorrect in the code or conflicting in the code, then yes, we should adopt an amendment to the code. But we can't do that when one project comes in front of us versus another one, and making decisions based on the appropriateness of a particular project. No, we have standards, and the standards of the zoning code and the standards of the SALDO are both applicable here. And that leads into my second point, which is this is clear forum shopping. This is the big issue I raised back in December. The applicant can either, you heard and you saw in the very well elucidated letter, the applicant can either go to the zoning hearing board or they can come before us. The zoning hearing board to grant waiver variances, the commissioners to grant a waiver. Guess who's easier? We are. Every developer knows it. So that's why the developer's coming before us. There's a much lesser standard. You heard it said, it's very well written and laid out in this letter. However, that's not an appropriate way or methodology for us sitting here to make a decision. They could go to the zoning hearing board, and I would argue should go to the zoning hearing board, because that's what they're trying to overcome, and they're just looking, they found a good way to circumvent that. Now, with regard to, I think the issue, setting it aside, I only raise it because of the undue hardship argument, any hardship would be self-created, and therefore they would immediately fail going before the zoning hearing board. So that's the second reason why they're here. Going into the third reason, I think Commissioner Grimes, you said this very well. This is a fully developable lot. President Sinai followed up on this. It is a single-family home. It can remain a single-family home. It could even be an enlarged single-family home. There are a lot of decisions that could be made with regard to this lot. Secondly, it can be a duplex. There can be 2 units. How you set those 2 units, whether they're side by side or 1 over 1, is a development decision by an owner. We are not obligated on this board to help developers or any business person who comes before us to have a better business decision on their hands. Right? Our job is to legislate. We legislated and we made a decision. And finally, fourth, the fundamental issue coming before us is a faulty premise. We are not obligated to have every lot in our township be subdividable. We have to have standards. We set those standards out. We have a methodology for them. Again, if Chris or anyone else from staff comes to me and says they need to be addressed, I'm more than happy to look at them globally across the entire township. But we can't do that project by project, regardless of what we think of any individual project. And importantly, not every project should be, or every property should be subdividable. We've all seen properties come before us that, the subdivision is by right. They come before us, whether we like the project or not. It happens, it goes forward. New houses are built or moved or whatever. So as we just go through this process step by step, we are faced with simply a business decision being made by a reasonable business person who has created, I will say, some of the nicest homes, especially newer homes in our communities, all throughout Lower Merion. But here, they simply want to develop a property in a way that they want to develop it, regardless of how our code is structured and what we just legislatively enacted, in a way that and in order to do so, they're making a forum selection of coming before us instead of the zoning hearing board. And I think from a procedural and methodology standpoint, that's just completely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, President Sinai. I mentioned this a couple months ago when we spoke on it, but there were some compromises made and some volunteering of some greening. And I found the developer's letter quite compelling when I read it this afternoon and was ready to maintain my yes vote. But what I've heard tonight from Commissioners Grimes, Whalen, and Sinai has actually swayed my opinion on this. I think why I wanted to vote yes was we have this inconsistency in our code. We have a problem area here, and I think the development that would be put up would be better than what's presently there, which is an abandoned, falling down single-family home. But Commissioner Whalen is right. We have to stop making these one-off decisions. I'm reminded of an argument on analogously about parking last week or last month. We should be legislating this, and we should legislate this soon. When we adopted the zoning code, it was our intent by making this an MDR1 that you would be able to have twins in MDR1, and that this stretch of Church Road could increase in density. It is very close to Suburban Square, which is where we have wanted to put our town center and village center housing. But just because there is a problem and an inconsistency in our code doesn't mean we have to grant a waiver. It means we have to fix the problem, and we have to do it according to our legislative process. So my mind has been changed, and I will vote no tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clemmy. Any other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I am going to make a motion that's different than the agenda. I'm going to make a motion to deny the preliminary subdivision plan, because we actually do have to vote on this. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Now that I've made a motion, any further comments from the board? Okay.
One quick,
Yeah,
if I may,
Commissioner Bernhardt.
Chris, if you don't mind. Maybe I should have done this a little before your motion, but same result. We talked about when we did the zoning code and the saldo that we were going to have adjustments. We were never going to get perfect on the first time, and we would learn as to what was going on. And the comments here are all very valid about the idea of addressing the code itself. If we were to do that, your recommendation would make a change that would make this permissible?
I think what we'd want to do is we would look at the minimum lot area for twins, and we would also look at the lot width. And we might, I think as we look at this, we'd want to actually compare the lot area of what we're seeing with the twins to the existing fabric of the community. I think one of the concerns is we might be getting twins that are larger than what's already here today. So we'd want to make sure that that lot area that we have in the zoning code is appropriate. And then I think we'd want to look back and say, if we are going to have a twin, and a twin is naturally a longer lot than a single family home, we may want to come back with a provision that says, instead, you would have a 2.5 to 1 ratio for singles, and you might have a 3 to 1 ratio for twins. We'd want to look at that and come back. But we would do some more surveying. That's what you saw in the information that we gave you to come back with that.
Okay. And that would be to the zoning code that we'd be making that change, not to the...
It could either be to the zoning code or to the subdivision code. But we'd want to make sure that you could that if somebody came forward and you had a conforming zoning lot, it would meet the provision of the saldo for the lot width for just a conforming lot. What you don't have that now is you had a conforming lot, it still wouldn't, if you had a literally conforming lot for zoning, it would be inconsistent with what's required in the saldo.
Yeah. So without putting you on the spot, which means I'm going to put you on the spot, so would you envision your recommendation be something that the change that may be, and that's a question mark, forthcoming, would then ultimately result that this development would be something that would be approved?
If my initial gut would say to make it 3.1, I think in our memo we had it was 3.1, 3.3 is the prevailing ratio of existing twins in the community. And it's like 1,700 twins that we surveyed that exist in the township. This application would still not comply with that. This application still exceeds that.
All right. So, albeit while I may not exactly agree with Commissioner Rowland that it's a forum shopping, because I understand, if you're challenging being at the zoning code or the saldo and the difficulty there, I think the other points are well raised. And So what I was trying to inquire is that if we were to go and do something, which procedurally would be to adjust the code, be it the zoning code or the SALDO, if it was only a matter of when, not if, we would have something that would make this development in compliance, then I might try to persuade what I see the winds drifting towards to go in another direction. But that's why I, put you on the spot with the caveat that I didn't mean to put you on the spot. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Zoff.
Simply want to say that the ward commissioner has offered his opinion and why he reached it. And since it's Commissioner Courtney's ward, and that's extremely persuasive to me.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zoff. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing that, we're going to call the vote. We are voting to deny this. I will say that we have a priorities meeting on March 5th. I would think that this is an issue that would be hopefully be deserving a priority adjustment. But anyway, so we have a proposal to deny. It's been seconded. All in favor of denying the subdivision application, raise your hand. Okay, opposed to the denial? Abstentions? And one abstention. So Madam Secretary, that passes or is denied. It was a 13 to 0,
And
1
one abstention, so it's unanimous.
Okay. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda sorry. I believe it's nearly all. The adoption of an ordinance. So we're on page 46 of the packet. We needed to raise some money. We issued some bonds, and our chief financial officer will give us an explanation.
Okay, thank you, President Sinai, and good evening, Board of Commissioners. This morning, we had a competitive bond sale that raised $25 million in bond proceeds of new money to finance the township's capital improvement program. That's inclusive of the reimbursement resolution passed last year, of which we've accrued approximately $2 million in that reimbursement resolution. I'll summarize a little bit just the events that happened today and then turn it over to our financial advisor, Mike Vind, for some more technical details. We also have bond counsel Morgan Haas, who is available to answer any questions you may have about the bond ordinance itself. As I mentioned, we raised $25 million for the CIP through the issuance of $24.1 million of bonds sold at a premium. That's why there's the difference between those. People will pay $110 per $100 of those bonds because they find it advantageous from a tax perspective to do so at a true interest cost of just over 3.7%. That true interest cost is roughly about 20 basis points better than what we were anticipating when the bond resolution was passed in January of 2025, and about 10 basis points better than our conservative estimates leading into the bond issuance. Before you is just an overview of the transaction. Again, $24.1 million in par amount bonds sold this morning with an anticipated delivery date closing on or about March 27th to finance the CIP and pay issuance costs. We are in a higher interest rate environment, and the history of the true interest cost of our most recent bond proceeds are shown in the far right-hand side. The previous high since the start of the Great Recession is the Series B of 2011, which was 3.5, and this is 20 basis points higher than that issuance. It was a competitive sale. We had 12 separate bidders and 33 total bids received throughout the auction. There were several extensions. This is a blind auction, so all the bidders know is whether or not they are the lowest bid. If they're not the lowest bid, they have opportunity to enter additional bids. And this summary shows the breakdown of those. Janie Montgomery Scott was the low bidder on this auction, and barely beating out BNY Mellon. There were several lead changes throughout the process. These things can be a little bit boring, but this was, I would say, a little bit more of an interesting one, just seeing all the activity and the lead changes going forward. This slide just shows a little bit of the timeline. We can't fit it all with all the bond bids that we received. The first one was from PNC, basically at our true interest cost estimate, so we knew right from there that a competitive bond sale would be a good thing for our bottom line. And you can see there, it took 19 minutes, and Janie came in at about 3.7%. Okay. I'm going to turn over to Mike Vind. He has some more information on the technicals, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions.
On page 6, as Adam said, we did have a very competitive sale with over 9 lead changes and several extensions. What we ended up with was about 11 basis points more favorable than our conservative estimates, as Adam mentioned. And that 11 basis points in present value dollars equates to about $250,000. So it is real dollars that, you know, this competitive process helped drive down. Here is a true summary. The bonds are maturing over a 20-year period from 2026 through 2045. You can see the par amounts, principal amounts in each year, the coupons, the final yields, and then the second to last column is what's called AAA MMD. And what that is the industry benchmark where all bonds are priced off of. The higher the interest rate, the higher the rating, the closer you are to MMD. So as you can see, and that's a 5% coupon spread. That's what the benchmarks benchmark to 5% coupons. What's the spread to MMD? The closer you are to, again, the higher you are on the rating, the lower that spread's going to be. As you can see, through the first several years until we get to 4% coupons where your spread bumps up just because you're not a 5% coupon, we were well under 10 basis point spread, which means we were almost right on top of the benchmark. And the weighted average maturity of the spreads over the life was a little over 18 basis points. I will show you the comparison to the 2022 issue later on in the presentation, which we'll come back to this and we'll show you the comparison of the spreads. Interest rates have increased dramatically since the pandemic lows. As you can see, we are still kind of in a sticky inflationary mode right now, where we're just can't seem to get to that 2% target. The Fed actually came out minutes today, said that they're still in a holding pattern and not going to consider lowering the federal funds rate until they see some other things in the economy loosen up. So they're not in any hurry. What does that have done since we've gone down to the last bond issue? The 10-year MMD, which is your 10-year AAA rate, that graph shows below. We showed where the 10-year AAA MMD has been since our last competitive issue, which was March 9th of 2022 until today. So that increase in the 10-year has been almost 2%. So you can see the dramatic increase over this 3-year period. On slide 8, this shows you the comparison I was just talking about. So on the right-hand columns or the right-hand graph, you can see our coupons, actual pricing, and the spreads to MMD comparatively to the auction we had today. And although rates were lower, you can see that the spreads that we were able to generate today because of the competitiveness and your solid credit rating were a lot tighter than they were in 2022. So our weighted average spread over the same time frame in 2022 was over 36 basis points. We were able to bring that down into a little over 18 basis points. And the graph to the left just shows you the yield curve on where we were, the blue line where we were in 2022 versus the yield curve today on a AAA basis. The final slide shows in column B, our existing debt service on an annual basis. The reason that 2025 is only $6 million right now is we had some large debt service payments in January. So it's not a full fiscal year. That is just as of the issuance of these bonds. And then 2026 through 2042 is the full years of current debt service. Column C is the annual principal and interest totals for this particular bond issue. As you can see, they're level at approximately $1.79, $1.8 million. And then column D is simply the total of the two columns. So this particular issue, adding 25 million, added approximately $1.8 million in annual debt service to the township from fiscal years 26 through fiscal years 2045. We were very pleased with the results. We think we hit the market in a nice time, and it shows just how fiscally sound the township is by getting that many folks and that many different bids over a very short period of time. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. So before we get to questions, I'm going to actually just make a motion. So I move that we adopt, adopt an ordinance authorizing the incurrence of non-electoral debt of the Township of Lower Merion by the issuance of 24,100,000 general obligation bonds, series of 2025, for the purpose of providing funds for and towards financing a portion of the township's ongoing capital improvement program, in paying the cost of issuing the bonds, authorizing the preparation and filing of a debt statement and other documentation, covenanting to create a sinking fund, and to budget, appropriate, and pay debt service on the bonds, and pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the township for the bonds, setting forth a substantial form of bond, setting forth the stated principal maturity amounts and dates, interest rates and interest payment dates, place of payment, sinking fund provisions, and other details of the bonds, authorizing the execution of a supplement to a continuing disclosure agreement, finding that a private invited sale of the bonds is in the best financial interest of the township, in accepting a proposal for the purchase of the bonds, appointing a paying agent and sinking fund depository, and authorizing any other necessary action. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement to the stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held January 22nd, 2025, and duly advertised in the February 14th, 2025 edition of the Times Herald. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. So I just have one observation. Congratulations on a terrific auction. I'm glad that we have benefited, even though the base rate is increasing, that spreads are tightening for high-rated credit like ours. That's been a good offset for us. And I'll also observe that we get to borrow at somewhere in the order of a 1.5% to 0.75% less than the federal government does. Lower rate than the federal government does, which we have a tax advantage, so it helps, but certainly that's a nice place to be, and is a tribute to our high credit rating. Any commissioner comments?
Just have a quick question.
Commissioner Churchill.
What will our debt be now? We'll probably be approaching 100 million.
It is still under 100 million. Mike, do you have that number on hand? We're going to be just north of 90 million at this point, post-issuance.
And how much debt are we retiring this year?
From now to the end of the year, if you don't issue anything else, it'll be approximately $3.5 million of additional debt this year, and the total principal amount, including this one, is, as Adam said, is right at, call it $97 million.
Mike alluded to before, we made 2025 in January. The total amount retired this year is 8.3 million.
So we will be way under the 100 million threshold, and you're saying with these payments will be about 90 million? Is that?
Yes, Mike, you have that number?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Just ballpark.
Yeah,
Just ballpark.
yeah, it's under 100 million, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Commissioner Zoff.
Thank you, President Sinai. Mike, I think you've explained it, but can you do it one more time? The issue was roughly 23.5 million. We expected to get more because we sell the bonds at a premium, but you said the issue actually ended up being 24.1 million. So why the difference?
Correct. So what we assumed conservatively was all 5% coupons, which would generate the biggest premium. When we actually went to the auction, we were able to get some 4% coupons in there, and our yields were lower. So the combination of the couponing and the lower yields that we were anticipating generated that increase in the par amount of the bonds. However, that math comes out to a overall lower debt service that you're actually paying an overall rate that the township would be paying on this issue. If that answers your question.
It does, yes. Thank you very much. And you said that the reduction in the true interest cost actually was a net present value savings of $250,000, or 1% of the total amount that we are now obligated for. So meaningful. Yeah. Okay.
It's absolutely meaningful.
Yeah. And you also said that the spread, can you explain this again? The spread went down in half from you said from 36 to 18 basis points.
That's correct. So the weighted average spread, the township always sells its debt on a level basis. So annual, principal and interest is level or equal. So it gives a nice comparison on an apples to apples basis. And it's nice that the 2022 issue was also a 20-year issue. So we were able to give a nice comparison of, okay, where were the spreads in 2022 on AAA rated paper versus what was the township able to get today on AAA rated paper. And the weighted average maturity in 2022 was over 36, and today is just over 18. So we were able to generate from that competitive sale much tighter spreads, which just helps on the total overall cost of the township.
Higher interest rates than 3 years, but a tighter spread to our benefit than 3 years ago.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. So what we did today was, I understand, going to fund capital expenditures for the next 2 years, 25 and 26. And we have a very ambitious capital expenditure plan for 2025, which was recently approved, some $65 million. Half of that money roughly half is coming from Lower Merion taxpayers and the debt we issued today. The other half roughly comes from other sources, including the ARP funds, which we've been talking about for a number of years, as well as grants from the state and the county and other sources. So we have some big projects that are underway, which have mostly funded with the federal funds. The new Ardmore Avenue Community Center, the significant renovations to Palm, some stream bank restoration. But we have in addition to the big projects, we have a very long list of projects that we're working on. Something, I believe, and Adam gave us some data today, 66 projects in the capital plan, which are slated to be worked on in this year of 2025. All of those projects will use some township money. Some will be entirely funded by the proceeds of this bond sale today. The fire apparatus replacement fund is at the top of the list. We're going to acquire 3 new fire trucks. Unusual. We typically acquire 1 per year. The significant improvements and cost to do so at Ashbridge House and the nearby stream bank restoration will be about half funded by the township, half funded by ARP funds. Sidewalk installation, road stabilization, playground improvement program, stormwater facilities, police records management system, with Axon, something we just approved, mostly funded by township capital funds from the borrowing we did today, and a long list of other projects. It is a very ambitious capital plan. There is, in some cases, some questions being asked by members of the public, like, what are we doing? That has recently happened at Ashbridge Park, and may be happening other places. So I know that the staff is trying to provide project descriptions so that members of the public who have questions can find out about what's being done and what's the timeline. Because construction and projects, by definition, are messy. And it takes a while before they're buttoned up, and they usually are a significant improvement in our community, but the process of getting there can be difficult. And I would just offer this. It is a very ambitious capital program, much of it, but not all of it, driven by the one-time federal funds that we have received. But I would say that we're doing a lot, and it's a lot for our management team to do, because they have to make sure these projects come in on time, on budget, and done the way we want them done and the way they're specified to be done. I am concerned that going forward, when the federal funds end and the ARP funds conclude, I think we have to consider dialing back what we're doing, because we are incurring a lot of debt in order to advance a very ambitious capital program. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. Any other commissioners with comments on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Madam Secretary.
For the adoption of ordinance 4305, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Ms. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Dr. Rossman.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Whalen. I thought he came back in, sorry.
You did?
You did, you came and then you left.
Just say yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Woodring?
Yes.
Mr. Zello?
Aye.
Mr. Sinai?
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Jody. We're now on to page 71 of your packet, which is adoption of ordinance, chapter A167V, administrative code tax collection fees. And I'm going to start by making a motion. I'm going to move that we adopt an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, chapter A167 fees, to increase certain fees related to the administrative code for tax certifications in bulk data files. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement to the stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held January 22nd, 2025, and duly advertised in the February 7th, 2025 edition of the Times Herald. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Any commissioner questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary.
For the adoption of ordinance 4306, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Aye.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Ms. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yep.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Abstain.
Dr. Rossman.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
You betcha.
Mr. Woodring.
Yes.
Mr. Zella.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Jody. We're now on to page 74 of your packet. And again, I am going to make a motion. I'm going to move that we adopt an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter A164, Civil Service Commission, Rules and Regulations, Section A16424, General Qualifications, to remove the application requirement for 60 credit hours from an accredited college or university, or 5 years experience with municipal or state police force, to amend Section A16438, General Qualifications for Civil Service Promotion, to require 60 credit hours from an accredited college or university for promotion to senior class officer, and to amend Section A16441, Civil Service Promotion of a Class A police officer, to provide that Class A police officer with 1 year of service in 60 credit hours from an accredited college or university shall be promoted to senior class police officer if qualified. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held February 5th, 2025, and duly advertised in the February 7th, 2025 edition of the Times Herald. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Zoloff.
Thank you, President Sinai. We discussed this at a committee meeting recently. There's 3 parts to the significant changes proposed in the requirements and procedures for hiring police officers. That's something that we are actively trying to do and have been for some time. Reducing the fees to 0 for taking the test, I support. For paying bonuses for new police officers that sign on and get through probation, I support. But I cannot support the the elimination in the 60 college credit hours for hiring of new police officers. In my view, it's a reduction in standards. And this is a requirement for new hires. And I understand that my colleagues, a number of them have a different point of view. I don't think we should do it, but I am looking forward to management's review after the next 2 cycles. The window opens very soon for hiring new police officers, and then we'll have another open window in the fall, Superintendent. And after that, those 2 cycles, I understand there'll be an evaluation of whether these changes have enabled us to have more qualified applicants. I hope to be proven wrong, but I'm skeptical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. Commissioner Gavin.
I disagree with Commissioner Zelov that it's a lowering of standards. I think we still have incredibly high standards for our police officers, but I am also going to vote no on this for a slightly different reason, which is I think removing the 60 credit hour requirement makes sense, and if we're going to do it, I think it also makes sense for promotion. I don't think it is tied to it. If you can have a wonderful officer who can come into the force without 60 credits, that person can also be promoted. So therefore, I'm going to be voting against this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zabrin. Yeah, Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support this because I think that this is an opportunity for our community to recruit some qualified and needed additions to our police force. I also believe that as an educator, I'm a strong advocate of education, but I also, has seen the trends that a college education is not a clear indicator about one's ability to do a certain job or to be successful in that job. And I think that the way that we put those parameters here, I agree with my colleague who proposed that we make sure that we review this at the end of in a year to make sure that it is successful. So it allows us to make adjustments as necessary, but I think that this is a great opportunity and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. So I will take the opportunity to speak next. I too support this. As Commissioner Zoloff mentioned, there are 3 elements: reducing fees and a bonus for sign-on for new police officers. Are obvious steps, at least directionally, will help us recruit. They're not going to make us any less effective, and they might make us more effective. And we certainly need to recruit officers into our force, like every police department appears to need to do. Everyone's short, and we need to be competitive. As for the 60 credit standard, I am of the view that it is not a lowering of standards, it's an expansion of what we consider high standards. And I think that is an important distinction. I think there are many ways to have very high standards of the police officer, and we should embrace the recognition that there are multiple ways to achieve that. I expect our police department is going to continue to have the same exemplary standards that we have come to appreciate and expect from them, and we will not see any diminution of that. I also believe that this is an opportunity. You're currently in our police force, to move up the ranks, you need ever increasing amounts of education. I'm an educator. I think that's a good thing. I could be proven wrong by Commissioner Gavin at some point, but at least this way, the cost of those education can be paid for by someone who has an income in a job, as opposed to before they have a job where they would have to get the education and pay for that, not knowing if they would ever be successful as an applicant for a police officer. Let's get them in the door, get them on our payroll, get them serving productively as a police officer, give them the opportunity to get an education, and progress through the ranks. I think we'll get more talented people. I'm glad to support this. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Grimes?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think a lot of this has been said. I also am in favor of this. In all things being equal, I think it'd be great to maintain the educational requirement, but the reality is we are not attracting sufficient officer candidates these days. I think there is, as others have said, I think there are other qualities that are important for officers that you might not get from a college education. And I don't mean that college graduates don't have this, but good judgment, street smarts, life experiences are helpful. No one should believe that we are not still thoroughly vetting candidates for anyone who wants to be a police officer in this township. I would note that the Commonwealth has recently removed college requirements for a number of their positions, and I think we're at the point where we need to try things to attract more officers. I would also note that our police leadership has recommended this, and I believe our senior staff has as well. So I'm pleased to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Any other commissioners with comments? Okay, seeing none. Jody?
For the adoption of ordinance 4307, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Ms. Epstein.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
No.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Dr. Rossman.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Woodring.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Nay.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
What is the
That-
count?
That was
There was 9 in favor and 2 opposed. No, 10 in favor.
10 in favor, 2 opposed.
11.
I'll be 12.
There was only 13 of you. There are 11 in favor and 2 opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have such great faith. That was a roll call vote.
Well, I wasn't looking at it. I'm not counting it as I'm going
Okay.
along.
Should there be a
Checking it
math?
off.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think it was duly adopted. So is there any unfinished business to come before the board? Any new business to come before the board? This meeting is hereby adjourned. Everyone, see you in March.